Hello and a very warm welcome to Bharata First. You're watching Big Picture with me, Frank Razum Ferreira. December 8th is observed as the SAARC Charter Day or SAARC Day. It was on this day in 1985 when SAARC came together. And all the member states decided to work together towards regional cooperation. Somewhere along the way, however, over the last 7 years or so, the entire process has been derailed. Is there scope for revival? In this edition of Big Picture, we will analyze all these aspects. And joining me on the program today are Rajiv Bhatia, former ambassador, Professor Swaran Singh, School of International Studies, JNU. He's also the chairperson of CPOT. Also with me on the program is Sanjay Kapoor, editor, Hard News. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of Big Picture. So what are the major factors that have contributed toward the derailment of the entire SAARC process? Is it also because, especially India, has found a workaround as far as SAARC is concerned? We've got other regional groupings which are doing reasonably well, be it the BIMSTEC or many others that we've partnered with over the recent past, to ensure that we bypass Pakistan, because Pakistan time and again has played spoil sport as well as far as SAARC is concerned. So has this become, in a matter of speaking, a matter of convenience for India?
Thank you, Frank, for bringing up this positive perspective as well, because it's not as if SAARC is dead and gone and regionalism is no more. Partly, I think, first of all, one has to understand that because of too much glare and focus on India-Pakistan disjunctions, we sometimes overlook that there are other issues as well that contribute to the problems within SAARC. The entire South Asian region, for example, borders have been a problem for most of the countries. Terrorism has been a problem for most of the countries. Then, of course, one could go to the nitty-gritties of taxes and transnational crime and other issues, water sharing and so on. So it's a gamut of issues that creates that environment in which, of course, India being inordinately large and powerful country in the region does have a certain responsibility, but we need to not just focus completely only to India-Pakistan, derailing the whole process. That is point number one. Second, as you mentioned, that even within SAARC, only very clearly the summits have not taken place. And the last summit, as was mentioned by Ambassador Bhatia, was in Kathmandu, 2014. Even there, you remember the Pakistan had not signed something called Regional Connectivity Agreement. So even that was undermined. But that had sort of laid out a roadmap of several achievements. And for the last 7 years, summit meeting has not taken place. But remember, this is not an annual summit. This is a biannual summit in that sense. And now let me come to the fact that there are very detailed, specialized bodies. Like, for example, you have South Asian University in Delhi, works fantastic. You have the SAARC Development Fund partly working fine. And of course, Arbitration Council in Islamabad. Likewise, there are regional centers, Cultural Center, for example, in Colombo, or Agricultural Center in Dhaka, or Energy Research Center in Islamabad, a TB, HIV, AIDS in Kathmandu. Now, these are structures which have been built over a period of time. They may not be working full steam, but they are not dead and gone. They are still active. Now, the third point, in terms of India exploring alternatives, the cooperation in the region has not completely disappeared. And there is a sort of alternative approach here, which we see, for example, whether it is South Asian Growth Quadrangle, which is BBIN, or it is Ganga Mekong Cooperation Initiative, or it is BIMSTEC. India has made sure that it can skirt through these difficulties and continue to engage its neighborhood. And neighborhood first is important for India if it has to rise as a major power and contribute to the larger region and global decision. So in that sense, I think we have to put things in perspective. Yes, SAARC is inactive briefly for about 7 years, definitely. It has been slow moving even before that for all these decades. It's not like it was super fast and suddenly came to a halt. And India has found other ways of dealing with the situation. And I think it's only inactive, but not dead and gone is what I'm saying.
Absolutely. Professor, taking the discussion forward now, let me bring in another aspect. So where does this leave all the other member states And what about Afghanistan, with everything that has happened there and all the political churning that we witnessed over the recent past in Afghanistan?
Let me say that it's a chicken and egg story in some ways. I heard Sanjay Kapoor say that if SAARC was active, maybe we could have found a solution to Afghanistan. But Afghanistan has been the problem. You remember last year in September, Nepal was trying to organize a foreign ministers meeting by the sidelines of General Assembly. And they could not come to consensus simply because they did not agree on who will sit on behalf of Taliban in that meeting. So that meeting couldn't take place. Indian Prime Minister last year in March also tried during the period of pandemic call an online conference. And we saw the kind of representation we received from Pakistan. So, sometimes these problems could also be exasperating the positive sense of how we wish to connect and revive SAARC, which is for me is an excellent forum, very useful and has a lot of structures in place which could be revived to bring that strength. And let me make a very sharp point here. I think sometimes we are also very narrowly focused on regionalism being synonymous to the SAARC summit meetings not taking place. Regionalism has to be understood in terms of multiple imaginations. For example, there are cognitive regionalism, there is imagined communities, there is a soft regionalism. APEC is an example, very successful example of soft regionalism, where focus is on businesses, business houses, intersocietal linkages, and look at the advantage that South Asia has. What ultimately regionalism seeks to do? Regionalization, which means bring a shared identity. South Asia already has a very strong regional identity. We are all subcontinental, Indian subcontinental, South Asian people. We already have that strong identity among people, societies, and businesses. Now, states may have certain limitations in engaging with each other on certain issues, particularly, but there are also enormous groundswell which we notice, which is available in case states want to take the initiative towards a positive outcome. China, of course, I want to just take another 10 to 15 seconds to say China definitely has emerged another stumbling block, shall we say, because the kind of overarching influence, other than Thimphu and India, all other SAARC members are members of Belt and Road Initiative. All others want China to be made a full member. Definitely that influences, just like some of the small countries have small state syndrome vis-a-vis India. India is also very conscious of what China is willing to do and can do if it is given the full membership in SAARC organization. So what I'm underlining is not just limiting and caricaturing it to India, Pakistan, tutu maime leading to end of SAARC. It's a far more complex story, and there are multiple factors that go into it. Even instability in Maldives could be related here as to why SAARC is not kind of coming back into action. So it's a much complex and nuanced reality that we face at this stage. But in principle, SAARC is very useful frame to revive and sort of find out how we can promote welfare of people in the region, how we can contribute to economic resilience post-pandemic period. So in theory, great possibilities, but in practice, enormous amount of hiccups that each state, primarily India, has to overcome in reviving SAARC.
Wonderful. Professor Soren, close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
Thank you, Frank. Apparently, all of us are in agreement that SAARC is relevant, that SAARC needs to be revived, and each one of us are suggesting the strategies. I come from an academic background, so in situations of what we call mutually hurting stalemate that goes on for a longer period of time, usual conflict resolution strategies prescribe focusing on peripheral actors and peripheral issues. So my recommendation would be, instead of hoping even for an hour-long summit meeting, which could be a bold initiative and could see leaders very reluctant because they always want to see what is in it for me, what is the return that I get by engaging leaders at that level, is to focus on incrementally issues that are really almost non-visible. Bureaucracies of SAARC in various centers, the regional initiatives, specialized agencies. And I agree with Ambassador Bhatia, involve civil society initiatives, involve in think tanks initiatives, for example, which are going to be less visible and perhaps more effective in taking the kind of building of that sentiment forward. And a very quick, good example would be how these BRICS nations have been trying to come together over a period of time. Every summit is preceded by about 50 events to build those domestic constituencies, to make them feel that they are connected despite being sort of physically disconnected, different sizes, different levels, etc., etc. So if you are able to strengthen the constituencies on the ground, that perhaps would be far more effective way of reviving SAARC, rather than imagining that they could sort of begin from the top instead. So bottoms up approach instead of top down approach is what I would recommend. And I think that is going to be far more effective as far as my understanding is concerned.
Absolutely. All right, gentlemen, we'll have to leave it at that. Thank you so much for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us.